person trained to real you never know.
Okay, we are on air, and it is 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Councilmember Peacock will be coming in momentarily. I want to thank you all for being here and tuning in to the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for the month of February 2023. We've got a few items on the agenda today to discuss, and the first one being our regular update on our public transit ridership report. For those that aren't familiar, every month in this committee we get an update from city staff on ridership numbers for public transit, updates on ongoing projects regarding public transit, and future plans as well, including route changes, the new central transit hub, all those types of things. So if you're interested in public transit, this is the place for you. So we'll go ahead and get started with item number 1. Take it from there.
Mr. Chairman, I want to introduce Jason Huff. You might not have met Jason. He's Taylor's right-hand guy. Taylor is a new father about 7 days ago, a week ago today. Or not a new father, he's got 2 other children.
Yeah.
Three children, so his third child was born Tate Alexander Johnson on February 15th, 7 pounds 9 ounces.
Nice.
Mom and baby are doing fine, but he's taking some paternity leave, and rightly so. So Jason's going to step in and give you the update today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, council members. We'll go ahead and get to the agenda. I'll kind of keep it brief like Taylor usually does. First on the update is items under the Go Norman Transit Plan and the long range update. So as you know, back in April of last year, I'll approve the purchase of the property at 320 East Comanche. And then on the February 14th council meeting, we came to council with a contract for approval from Stronghold Construction. That was approved. We met with them yesterday. They're going through the final permitting process on all their stuff to get everything in order, and they plan to begin construction next Wednesday, March 1st on that property.
So exciting.
Yeah, so we'll get moving on that, and of course that ties in with all the route changes that have been previously approved, and they kind of all tie together. So that transit center, the route changes, and all the bus stop improvements as well.
And how long do we think timeline for the
Remodel?
Yes.
Yes, they've given us on their contract approval was for 4 months. July was their date that on their contract, their bid proposal. So of course that's depends on supply chain and all the items that come with that. So, but as of now, we don't expect any significant delays.
So we do anticipate it to be right in line with the new route rollout.
Yes, yeah, they go hand in hand. So when the transit center comes up online, the routes will also be on the same time frame.
Perfect. That is sooner than I was expecting. I was
really
thinking
fast.
like 6 or 9 months.
Yeah, we
Expecting
were
double that.
yes, we were surprised when their bids
Well,
came in.
great. It's always good to hear. Okay.
Second on our list are grants. Of course, we continue to work with the Federal Transit Administration and draw down our grants and apply for all new funds that come through. ACOG and the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, STBG, awarded their funds this month in February 2023. So Norman was awarded 2 bus replacements through that program. That's going to be administered by ODOT. So we'll get to work with them to get 2 more 35-foot buses.
Will those be electric buses or?
No,
Natural gas?
They'll be natural gas buses.
Okay.
Yes.
And they'll replace
Two current existing ones. Yes.
Do you know how old those 2 are?
No, off the top of my head.
I guess in the 20-year range,
Old?
probably. Yeah.
The ones that we just replaced were 2003
Yeah.
with the electric buses, so they're in that range. Old, very old. Our microtransit study with HNTB, we continue to work with them to develop an RFP. We hope to have that come forward in the next month or so.
Okay.
Of course, that was previously approved, Monday through Saturday evening service, then on Saturday, and as well as service on Sunday, which we don't currently offer.
And that service is ADA compliant?
Yes, it would be ADA compliant, accessible to wheelchairs and all users in Norman.
Okay. And just for Councilmember Peacock, they updated us that the transit hub could be finished within 4 months, apparently by July, if weather permitting and no delays.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, and right in a line with the new routes rolling out at the same time is the
Perfect.
idea. So,
Great job.
yeah.
Yep. Cross our fingers, we don't have any of those delays or supply chain issues with those.
And I think hopefully all those are behind us at this point.
Yeah, I sure hope
Hopefully.
so. Kind of touched on vehicle procurements with the award of the SCBG funds. Our electric buses, we had an event on January 31st, where the public can come and view the electric buses. As of today, we put one in service on the 15th of February. We're still working with Gillig on the other one to finish up the final programming issues with that, and before we do final acceptance of that vehicle. So one is currently on the routes today, and we hope to have the other one online shortly.
Great.
As of that, we still have the 5 paratransit vehicles and another 5 CNG 35-foot buses on order. Those should be delivered on your packet. It says March to April and then June to July this year. So hopefully those stay in the queue and online, and we don't hit any delays with those, and that'll bring another 10 vehicle replacements online. All right. Ridership for January 2023, all positive numbers here. The ridership for January was 23,144. That's a 41% increase over last January's, which was 16,384. This continues our month-to-month increase for the whole fiscal year, actually, on our fixed routes.
And January of last year, would you say we were already back to normal?
We were still increasing last year.
Right.
I wouldn't call it, pre-COVID number normal. I think we're getting closer to that now with our January
We've
23
been
numbers.
operating
But we've been
as
operating
it would have operated before COVID. We're like back to normal operations for
Yeah.
over a year now, I guess.
Yes. Well, we're getting back up to those numbers. I don't know if January 22 reflects pre-COVID numbers. They were still increasing
Right.
On that rebound after the capacity restrictions were lifted and all that matter. But month to month, it still increases. We're still having those percentage increases. So we're getting back to those. If we're not there already, we're back to those pre-COVID numbers.
Yeah, that 95% increase on the West link.
I think last month it was also like 97%
Yeah.
increase on that route. But if you look at the riders, 244 passengers over 125 the previous year. So that
Right.
still is drastically less than all the other routes.
And looks like all the Saturday routes have increased.
Yes.
Ridership as well. 101% on the Lindsay East. A big increase in bikes taking it too, I noticed. So
Yes, sir.
okay.
We're pretty happy with those numbers.
Any questions from committee members about public transit ridership?
One more tidbit, if I may, weird one, but I meant to make a slide for it. So the EV buses grants, so one from ODEQ and the other one from
FTA.
FTA. The DEQ grant was written, something that most people don't know, but you're taking a really dirty diesel bus out of the system, and that's why you're getting the grant for the clean bus. But as part of the grant, you have to eliminate that dirty bus and make sure it never ever ends up on the road again. And you do that by drilling a 3-inch hole through the engine block, which we did 2 days ago. And then yesterday, we did fire department training, and they cut a 35-foot bus in half. I have a picture of a 35-foot bus cut in half.
Seems very drastic.
Most people don't know that that's in the federal grant, but we've done this before through clean energy grants. And the point is, as you can imagine, they want to make sure that dirty vehicle doesn't get back on the road, because they will. They'll go into an auction and someone will buy it. Well, this will never be back on the road. So if you want to see what a 35-foot bus cut in half looks like. And our fire department had a ball. I hear you guys just had a blast
We've got
doing
some spray
this.
paint out.
Yeah.
Well, we had the opportunity also, and we got that bus probably 5 days prior to the deadline, and we were able to get out every station and send them over there, actually get all of our airbag equipment, our struts and stabilizing equipment, cribbing, shoring, and all of that, and take every station through
Yeah.
and lift it up off of a patient, laid up underneath the bus, and work with all that equipment. And
Sounds
then
like you see
we
that.
went through all the Paratech equipment, which is carried on the squad. It's the only truck that carries that. So
I want to be involved
it
next
does
time.
give the opportunity to stabilize an entire
I
bus
wasn't
all by
there.
itself. So that one unit can do that by themselves, but it's obviously much better to have everybody there. So it was great to use all the equipment and see how it worked out. I don't know, and I know this on a side note, but I don't know that the reward of the training we got, it would have been greater to have more time, you know, to do more training with the bus. The short amount of time and then cut it in half was a workload in itself, but, you know, but it was a great opportunity for everybody. So thank you.
It
Yeah.
wasn't something we planned, but it really was a meaningful training exercise for them, and we met our obligations too. We didn't have a choice. So now we package all these photos up, send them back to DEQ, and prove that we are now good on the grant.
What happens to the bus now? Just
Well, this
scrap?
goes to the landfill, I'm sure, along with everything. They'll never run again, obviously. so,
Sure.
Scrap.
Scrapped it.
Scrap,
Okay.
yeah.
Would be more ideal for sure.
Yeah.
Councilmember Grant?
If somebody wanted to check out the plans for the transit hub, where would they find those?
So I'm not sure if they're actually online. I'm sure we can find them online. I'll have to double check that.
Yeah, the closest I could find was that Go Transit report from the final one from June 2021, and it kind of lays out where the places could be. It doesn't really. give
Right,
us
so in that
definitive-
plan, the initial assumption was possibly the depot to go in line with the RTA, future transit light rail line. You know, due to pushback, we reevaluated that and chose the property on East Comanche, which is just a couple blocks away from that. So I'm not sure if if you didn't find them online, they might not be online yet.
We'll send it to you.
But we can send that to you for sure.
This is
Yeah,
McKinney
like
Architects.
renderings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of what
Yeah.
it's supposed to look like, and then also like what kind of bus traffic is coming through. It's just Embark, right?
Yes, just embark on our fixed routes bus lines. We'll use that, kind of like we use the Brook Street Transfer Center currently.
Because I've gotten some questions from the neighbors about like, oh gosh, what kind of bus traffic? And yeah, and also we have that street work coming on Porter too.
Yes.
And I'll mention too, on
Yes.
your agenda Tuesday is a project to repair the alley. There's still some work to do back there, so we're trying to get out ahead of all this before the buses start running. We think this fall, or that's kind of the target we're shooting for.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I would love some renderings to
We'll
share.
send those to you.
Absolutely. We
We've
will
got
get
some
those
really
to you
good
for sure.
images that you'll appreciate. Aside from the architectural plan, there's some nice images inside and out that you'll see the bigger picture.
Thank you.
And I would note that alleyway project is definitely very important because it's heavily used by the Highland Dairy trucks also. So it's adding the buses onto it as well. It's going to get probably the heaviest use of any alleyway in Norman, perhaps.
Good point, yeah.
So I'll look forward to seeing that on the agenda. Any other questions from? Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, it's great to see the ridership continuing to grow. I think the numbers speak for themselves for anybody in town that still believes nobody rides the public bus in Norman. I just would encourage you to please tune into this meeting. All of this information is public information, and we go over it every month. And you can get a much more accurate and clear picture of how our system's being used and the changes that we're planning to make so that it will be more efficient and more reliable for people to continue using, and hopefully encourage more people to use it if they can rely on it, you know, to get where they need to go quickly. So, thank you. Does Embark have anything you'd like to?
Sir, no, sir, I'm just here to represent in case you had any questions that.
Any questions for Embark staff?
There you go.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we will move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is discussion regarding parking issues around schools. I think we're all very familiar with those issues, as many of our older school buildings are in the middle of neighborhoods, and I guess that's not the practice anymore. Most new schools are built on arterial roads, which I don't think is a really good thing for kids trying to walk to school.
Love our neighborhood schools.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal, but it does create a lot of issues with parking and traffic, as we know. So staff is here to give us a presentation.
Issues with traffic? Okay. Did you want to open with anything? Just go ahead. All right. So a little bit about our agenda. We're going to talk through some of the typical procedures that I guess my office and Norman Public Schools go through anytime there's an issue that comes up, and how we try to collaborate on everything as much as we can, and a little bit about our collaboration schedules. We'll talk about typical school drop-off and pickup times, because those are obviously the times when people are most concerned about traffic. We'll talk about how the sanitation division deals with traffic around schools, how the mail delivery occurs around schools, and a little bit to summarize, and a little bit about what Norman Public Schools can do moving forward and what we can do moving forward as a city. This is a map showing the Jefferson and Longfellow areas. It's probably one of the more unique in town, because it has both an elementary school and a middle school in pretty close proximity to one another.
Alcott and Jackson are also very close.
Right.
And then Whittier is just south. So like,
It's not a good area either.
argue that is.
There's some traffic jams.
But these are there's only one block separating these two schools. Norman Public Schools does a lot of good things. They do stagger the start times and dismissal times for the elementary and middle schools for those reasons. But that doesn't necessarily account for the fact that people will get in line to pick up their kids an hour, 90 minutes ahead of the dismissal time, and that's what causes the problems.
Jefferson is the site of the original elementary school.
Right.
The bell tower is a homage to the original building that was there.
So any time we receive a complaint, we're going to reach out to Norman Public Schools first, because it's not a problem that we can solve by ourselves or that they can solve by themselves. We got to work together to get this palatable for the people. We're never going to solve the problem entirely. They can't lay enough concrete or asphalt to solve every problem that occurs, but we try to make them as good as we can. We have meetings regularly every other month, and in between if we have to get together to talk about an issue, but we meet at least every other month. And there's always issues to talk about. It doesn't matter. When August and September roll around, we know that there's going to be phone calls about this school or that school or all the schools. And having them on our arterials, I don't think is a great idea either. I don't really think Reagan works very well. We've talked about that. That line backs up. They take a lane of 24th all the way down to East Ridge, and that's just not a good thing. Somebody comes off Highway 9 and sees the line of stop traffic, there's going to be something happening in there. So we are working with them to try to address that. They made some internal changes at Reagan, and they seem to be using the South Drive more than the North Drive, where we actually put this traffic signal in for them. So that's not real popular with me. We tried to work together on the front end, and some things have changed. So we're working through those issues with them. It's just nothing is solved overnight with any of these schools. Both the schools and the city know what these challenging times are. They're not so much the drop-off time, because that usually happens and then they leave. They're not stacked up to drop off like they are to pick up. They don't queue up waiting for their turn in line. Right. It doesn't matter what school you talk about. I mean, I live out by Lakeview. That's probably the smallest of all the elementary schools in Norman, and there's a problem there too. And they're on a 50-mile-an-hour road, so
It's just a 2-lane country road.
yeah, it is definitely. So again, there's issues, but we do meet regularly and talk through all these issues. They take this situation very seriously. They have a dedicated staff member, David Teicher, who used to be I guess when he left, he was a major in the Norman Police Department. He's been assigned to work with us on all these issues. I had reached out to David to be here tonight, kind of as a show of support, and issues kept him from being here. But It's not because they don't think these things are important. We did have an issue. I wanted to give you some positives out of our collaboration. We did have an incident. We were notified within the last couple of weeks at Irving Middle School. Something had changed and the traffic was backing out onto Alameda and it was just a mess. Well, apparently the principal of the school, first-year principal, had decided that there were things she didn't like about the pickup procedure, and she made some changes, made it safer for the kids, but it created this backup that was unbelievable. So I talked with David Teicher. He talked to the principal. They made some tweaks to what she had done to try to arrive at something that was going to be better for everybody. Another one that's been around for a long time is McKinley Elementary School. We had that project where we put in the lane for pickup and drop off that was all the way around the perimeter of the school property. That helped a lot there. Of course, there's other issues associated with McKinley that we're still trying to work through, but that addressed a big part of the problems there, so.
Agreed. As the issue at Irving has been resolved?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, David actually went out and looked at it and he said, yeah, I see what you're talking about. It will be addressed today.
So, Councilman Grant?
Just curious, so what was the solution? Like, was it
With
creating?
Irving?
Yeah, was it creating parking around the school and off of the street?
No, what she had done was, apparently they had 2 lanes coming into the school for pickup, and it was causing a situation where the kids had to cross in front of a lane of traffic to get to if they were on the other side. And she didn't like that, so she created where it was a single lane. So you took 2 lanes and went down to 1 lane. Yes, it's going to back up further, but I don't know exactly what the solution was, but I know that they arrived at something that made those problems go away.
Interesting.
Drop-off times, and this, you can insert whatever name of school you want to insert here. There is impact to these neighborhoods. It's generally minimal if you can get past the fact that people are queuing in line 60 to 90 minutes before the drop-off period. Usually, it's no more than 30 to 45 minutes, and then the problem's gone. There are, again, drop-off is easier because it's a quicker procedure, so we don't seem to get as many complaints about drop-off as we do pickup. And again, the only reason that backup is better is because it's a problem because they all arrive at the same time. They're not spread out over a period like some schools have. I'm picking on Norman North. They have 0 hour, so they have students who actually come early. There's preschool activities or before school activities that some people drop off on their way to work. So they're not all coming right when school starts. So that's a better situation for those. But pickup, it's generally all at one time. It's, there are some after-school activities, but they're not as prevalent, I don't think, as the before-school activities. Pickup, again, at any school, parents and grandparents tend to arrive so far in advance, or so long in advance. A lot of these schools are in residential neighborhoods where they're pretty narrow streets, may or may not be parking restrictions. That's a whole nother issue because technically they're not parked, they're standing because they're staying in their vehicle. If they get out of the vehicle, then they become a parked vehicle. And enforcing that issue is very, very difficult for parking enforcement or police in general. We've tried to put up signs to discourage standing or parking. I've said this just about every time I've been to this group. Any sign I put up is just a recommendation. It's only as good as the people who would enforce it. So if I put up a sign that says no parking or no standing and there's nobody there to enforce it, who's going to abide by it? Nobody. So we did have some photos come in recently of the situation around Jefferson. I think they were a little bit older. I think that the conditions had changed slightly from when the pictures were taken. But these pictures are, you could take these pictures at any school, really. That's what happens. People just park wherever they park. Doesn't matter if there's a shoulder on the road to park on or whether they're in somebody, they're just there for a short period of time it can't be that big a problem to them.
But also
To the
point
landowners.
out, it is the wrong direction to be on that street.
That's true too.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, they shouldn't be parked on that side of the street. You're all correct. More of the same. Again, they're parked on the wrong side of the street as well.
I don't know why, but that's like one of my biggest pet peeves in the world. I just don't know why it gets at me, but when people park on the wrong side of the street, parking the wrong direction, I'm always
And
just
in
like,
front of a
what are you
driveway.
thinking?
Is that, well, last one was in front of a driveway.
Parking in front of somebody's driveway that's not yours.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll be happy to know that I got a warning yesterday, actually, for doing that very same thing.
Parking the
I
wrong
was,
way.
I was running into somewhere real quick and just, jumped out of the car. In the 5 minutes I was in there, was enough time for them to give me a warning. So they are patrolling that, just so you'll know.
That's a trash day you're looking at, and you got somebody else's car in front of a resident's trash receptacle.
Right. Right. Let's see. Essentially, what happens is gridlock. I mean, you can't get through. We did reach out to, when we heard about the complaint, we did reach out to sanitation. I'm getting to that. And we did reach out to the Postal Service to see what they do. We'll get to that. The answer I got from sanitation is all their drivers know where their schools are and what the times are, and they know to pick up not during, they know what hours not to pick up during. So there is no trash collection occurring when all those cars are queued up. That trash can could have been there from the morning, I don't know.
I mean,
Sure.
I know that neighborhood. So, and also there is a photo of a post office or a mail truck where they cannot get to the mailbox, and they require in that neighborhood that it's not on your door, it's on the curb, the mailboxes. So,
I'm only telling you what I was told. Because we did, actually, it was David Teicher that reached out to the Postal Service. And they told him the same thing, that their drivers know when they should and shouldn't be in these
that
school
day
districts.
that photo was taken, I don't know if it's in this set, that school was having an extra, it was like not the usual times.
Right, okay.
So this does come back to communication with the school,
Right.
but yeah. Okay,
And
I'll
that's
stop
not,
in
and
there.
that's not when we're gonna hear about it.
Yeah.
We're gonna hear about that pickup time in the afternoon. So, yeah, if they do something during the day and have an assembly or something like that, that's a very different situation. And that's probably something that should come up in our meetings with Norton Public Schools, the next one we have, or I can reach out to them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Try to get some answers about that. But they offered the same, they did have the caveat, though, that not all drivers are veteran drivers. And sometimes they have to learn when's the right time, but you only get stuck in that once.
Yeah.
You only get stuck once and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I should not be here now. I should be delivering somewhere else during this time. So they understand and they try to work around it. It's unfortunate that they have to work around it, but if you can't get through, you can't get through. So.
Yeah.
Just to summarize the pickup time, we did reach out to both those entities, the Sanitation Division and USPS. They deal with it, is what they said. And they deal with it by educating their drivers when they should and shouldn't be in those locations. So they're helping. Going back to the comment about the assemblies, that's something we need to talk through further, I think, with Norton Public Schools. And not just this school, that's probably applicable
Oh, it's
to
all
any
of
school.
them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I know Jogathon's always a day that's,
right.
Or grandparents.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Day, yeah.
So what can Norman Public Schools do moving forward? Well, part of their, I guess, the most recent bond package at that school relocated the office facilities. Their bus drop-off was relocated temporarily to account for that construction. It just so happened that the week that the complaint came in was when they finished the office and moved the bus stop back to the other side of the school where it should have been. So that's helped some of that. It's not going to help all of that, but it's going to help some of that. But they did make observations on 2 different occasions, confirming that there was nobody parked on, is that Stewart, on the west side of the school?
I believe so, yes. Because
And-
Cockrell's on the east side.
Right. And they confirmed that there was nobody parked there, so there shouldn't be an issue with Stewart anymore. Problem is that the queue now is extending all the way back to
I see it, yes.
Longfellow, and when those parents and grandparents get in line, there's nowhere to go. So there's issues to be worked through. But, well, it's at the slide after this one. Their bond packages do help. There's always something in there related to transportation. It's just they can't, most all these schools are landlocked. So there's not really anything that they can do to build their way out of this. They have to get creative with the solutions moving forward. And we've identified a lot of those, and we will identify more. I'll assure you of that. One of the things that we identified, we actually had another citizen contact us about the intersection of Hubert and Finley and asking about, is that a candidate for always stop? Because we did some always stops in conjunction with Norman Public Schools at Finley and Gray and Ponca and Gray. And this intersection of Finley and Hubert it's already got crosswalk striped on all 4 approaches, which kind of gives people the wrong impression. I think when you see crosswalk striped like that, you think that traffic is stopping when in effect, two directions are not stopping. So we've got a study underway, and we'll see if that meets the criteria, and if it is, we'll install an always stop there. Now, that's not going to do anything about the fact that the 2 schools are competing for the same space in their pickup period, but it will make the intersection safer for the kids that are trying to cross through that intersection.
And I do see people actually following the 4-way stops. Like, they don't block the intersections, but when you only have 2 of them, they do.
Right.
So it's hilarious. I don't know why, but quirk of human behavior, I guess.
Mhm.
So.
That's it exactly. With that, if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
I know, well, in my, as you mentioned, it's really at almost all the schools, but
No, it is.
in my observation, Whittier has seemingly been the worst one. Is that maybe accurate?
I live right there.
Yeah.
So I would say it's pretty bad.
Just because Brooks Street is a very narrow street,
Right.
and it's the only street that goes through without having to go to Lindsay or over to Boyd, and so it's a cut through for a lot of folks that live in that neighborhood. So I've run into it myself when I wasn't thinking, and I ended up over there, and then all of a sudden I turned into a standstill of cars,
Well,
and there's no way to get around them either.
I mean,
sometimes.
it's not even just Brooks, because on McGee, on the I guess, southbound side, you can go towards the alley and kind of go back and around, and people will do that, and they can pull off into like the berm of the road because there's enough kind of easement there. But then they also queue northbound on McGee from Lindsay going towards Boyd, and that's when it gets a little kind of hairy. I'm not typically out of my house at this time, but like I live just across McGee, so it can be challenging, to say the least.
I think Whittier has gotten a little better since they constructed the bus lane in the back.
In the back,
In the back.
has helped. But what I'm saying is not everybody is coming from the
Right.
going southbound on McGee to kind of get into that queue. They start and they're like, oh, I want to queue to go left onto Brooks. So they are queuing in the northbound lane on McGee, which there is no place. Like you are in the lane there.
Right.
Like there is no sidewalk or like no area. They can't pull off onto the sidewalk because the sidewalk is raised there.
Right.
So yeah.
And I think Whittier, it's much more difficult for any of their students to walk to school because their district, like Whittier's not
What's
in
up
its
there?
own district. It's
No.
so weird that it's, if you live south of Main Street, you go to Alcott, but Alcott is north of Whittier.
Yes.
And so everybody that goes to Whittier lives north of Main Street. So it's like, or across the I-35. And
That's interesting.
so, it
Yeah,
never
it's
has made a whole lot of sense.
Flipped. I see a ton more kids walking from Alcott.
Yeah.
Like across the street, south to all the neighborhoods and
They all
parents
live in-
picking up and kind of leaving. But yeah, Whittier is not the same. And so I don't know if there's ever been anything explored about like alternate busing to a location from Whittier so that parents could pick up like in a parking lot, even if it was just like on Main Street somewhere, or I mean, we've got lots of parking lots.
You don't say.
You know,
Creative
so
with them, right?
just thinking like, you know, how do we make this a little bit easier? Now, I know that some parents are going to resist that because they want to pick up their child at the door of the school. But I'm wondering if like some would be open to exploring some,
That's a topic we could definitely raise with them.
not have to sit in a queue. Hey, let's go to, I mean, even, I don't know, the Homeland parking lot on Lindsay, or, you know, something else where like they can get a shuttle quickly.
But also, I
too.
would say it's like, sorry, the behavior of some of the folks coming into these schools, because they don't live in the neighborhood. And I would say some of the things we see with like the what you called standing parking basically, are people playing their music really loud, or parking in people's ditches, or throwing their trash in people's ditches. So I do think there's something to be said about the culture of the people doing the carpool and maybe tightening the reins there. But that feels like a communication from the school to parents.
Right.
So,
We've done things like that where we've suggested that they used to have Thursday folders. They don't do that anymore, but every Thursday they would send the child's folder home and they could put information in it about whatever topic it was. And can you put something in the Thursday folder about this particular issue? So we can do that again.
I feel like if I was a parent, I would absolutely dread having to do that every day.
We walk
Wait
for the very
around.
reason.
Wait in a queue of
You
cars
got in
for
the
an
queue
hour.
and didn't like it, and they choose to be in the queue.
Yeah, exactly. And having to do it every day for years, multiple
Right.
years.
Lots of kids
That's
walking to Jackson, walking to little scooters.
Yeah.
You know? I'll see parents walking away from the school and they're like dragging their kid's scooter because they're like scooter walk to
I do that every
school. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really sweet too. Like I think it's like a nice kind of thing that parents get to do. But yeah, Whittier is a whole nother animal.
Well, I was going to even suggest that you, excuse me, throw that out there to NPS as like, can they do some sort of promotion or program that promotes walking and say, hey, if you guys walk to school, we're going to, I don't know what the incentive is, but promotes healthy living. It gets cars out of the queue. It just really, I mean, kind of approaches the problem from a different angle. So
We've done the safe walk to school. We've gone in and redid all the sidewalks around the school building, and
Yeah.
ADA and ramps and all that stuff.
which is
Help promote
good
it.
if the sidewalks connecting to those
If
are
they go
there.
somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
We have put some sidewalk on Finley actually through Community Development Block Grant, because
Right.
through the satellite images, we could see where the kids were beating a path in. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I personally think the traffic's great because it forces cars to slow down through this
That's a
area
good point,
at
too.
a time of day when
That's
you've
true.
got kids running all over the place. So
That is a good point.
I don't complain.
So,
I just walk.
Yeah. Yeah, congestion does make places more walkable, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, well,
Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
thanks.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, we got a couple discussion items on the agenda. Given the events in Ohio, of course, I've gotten quite a few questions. Railroad runs through Ward 7. So I've got quite a few questions from people about what would Norman do if something like that happened here. And we have kind of briefly discussed it before, but I thought it might be a good opportunity to get our staff to talk about how Norman might address that situation if it were to ever happen here. The official topic is discussion regarding emergency response to train derailments and other hazardous situations.
Thank you, Councilman Hellman. I'll give you a copy here, and I'll start a copy down on this end.
Thank you.
What I'm handing you is what they call a commodity flow from BNSF. This is what tells you kind of what goes through the town of Norman. As you'll see on the cover sheet, the email that's on top of it, it is considered sensitive information, and I will recover those documents at the end of our discussion. Okay. In a opening statement, do we have any general questions needing to be addressed first? And I apologize I'm standing this way because I left my high-speed VA-issued hearing aids on my desk. Some people put their best foot forward, so I got to put my best ear forward.
That's fair.
So thank you very much.
I don't have any specific questions. I think just the general community would maybe find some comfort in knowing that we are prepared, or that we are aware of the situation that could happen in Norman.
Yes,
and that we are-
great scenario, and for that, I ask Chief to provide us a suppression chief officer. This is Ronnie Davenport, and if I get my tactics wrong, he will stand up and correct me.
Perfect.
If you have any questions specifically on the response side, that's why I asked Ronnie to come. In a general statement, and we've had some train derailments. Fortunately, we did a really great job of feeding all the field mice. It was a shipment of corn had overturned and grain here a few years ago.
I remember that, yeah.
So that helped populate the field mice in the area. So in a general answer is that when we have a shipment come through, something should occur. What will normally happen is everybody will call 911, not just anyone, or we'll get a lot of calls. Many ways, they have I think, do they have the text messaging now, dispatch?
Did you say tape messaging? I'm not sure if they have that or not, as far
I
as
know
like,
I know they've been working
They've been
on
working
the
on it, yeah.
technology so people could even text it to dispatch, and that's been in the works for a long time, so I also don't know where that stands, but I know it's happening. Not only that, but from Facebook and social media and telephone calls, and so that telephone, that knowledge of knowing that something happened, happens pretty quick. So when that happens, and based on the protocols in dispatch, and again, Ronnie might be able to answer exactly what gets toned out for a hazmat, the dispatcher starts calling units up and starts setting the tones out to the police and the fire and emergency medical, and depending on what those needs are. Of course, the issue is what has wrecked. It's a train. It's got cars laying everywhere. But what's in the cars? So that's the key thing on the initial response that we need to know. What is it carrying? And we do that by various ways. As if you had any kind of training in chemical awareness training, you know that there's placards and there's signs that are on the cars, and there's numbers and letters, and all of those things mean stuff. An example of what those things are located on the sheets that I'm passing around. In that spreadsheet, you'll see those ID numbers. And they're usually located on the tank cars, as well as the placards. The placards are usually color-coded. Depending on that color, you can tell immediately what you're dealing with. In a general sense, red is bad stuff. It will go boom. White is corrosive. You don't want to mess with it or touch it, and so forth and so on. So immediately, once that knowledge of what is on that tank car is determined, that will shape the response from the fire department. And then the first unit on the scene will arrive, and if we've been through incident command classes, and I know Councilman Holman has because I taught it to him, you do a scene size up. From that scene size up, that chief officer or that station captain has to start calling in additional resources. The biggest concern that we have right there, if it's really bad stuff and it's flowing, we got to stop the flow. If it gets into the water, that's a whole nother set of rules that we have to immediately deal with. As we had a construction crew out east off of 36, the driver just decided to dump his tar on the street, which ran down the hill and ran into the little tributary, and we caught it almost all the way to Thunderbird. It was in the water. So we had to respond, and fortunately that stuff was water soluble and it wasn't a really big threat. So once we've identified what it is, now we can start gathering our resources, and that will come from obviously initially within the city. If it's fluid material, we're going to try and burn it. We're going to try and stop that flow. If it's a wind situation where it will affect the neighborhood, we will have to get a media release out. What do we want those citizens to do? How do we want the residents to react? Do we want them to leave, or do we want them to shelter in place? If it becomes a volatile situation where, like a gas main that breaks, a large gas main, well, anybody that lights a cigarette in and around there, that's a pretty bad thing. Well, the same thing happens to the fumes that's coming off of some of this material. So we have to make those assessments, make them quick. And then from that, I'm going to say, Ronnie,
where do we go
why
from here?
don't you tell us more about the response capability?
Yeah, so I mean, if it was just a generic, like, we don't really know what it is, it's just a hazardous situation, maybe like at a post office or something, hey, we got some hazardous thing going on, we're not sure what it is, our response is going to be fairly limited. But in a train derailment, and I know kind of looking at the documentation that was sent through the email thread, one side of this is what are you going to do if the grain bin tips over, right? It's non-hazardous. It's just a situation that's really a nuisance to the community. It's got everybody stopped that can't get on either side of town. How are we going to fix this? That's just going to probably be a normal response for us. So you're probably going to send, even though it's a train derailment, probably going to be 2 engine companies, the squad, which is stationed right there at the airport. Kind of like I talked about, they've got some unique resources, but when you're talking about a train, those resources are only as good as what we can use it on. Our job isn't going to be to move the train or to pick the train up or take the product away. That's going to be the train situation as we get with the emergency manager, say, hey, here's what we've got. So initially, when we get responded out, you probably get 2 chief officers, 2 engines, probably a squad, probably 2 ladders. Those are probably going to be like an initial response to like a train derailment. Once we get on scene and we do figure out what maybe product we have, if we can't get a hold of the conductor of the train or the engineer of the train, basically we can find the manifest and find out what products are on that train. If we can't get a hold of them or find anyone, then we're going to start making phone calls, get a hold of BNS or the railroad system, and then find out, hey, what's on this train that we need to know about? Do you have a list? Can you email, fax, text? I don't care, but get it to me right this minute. While we're doing that, all these other different units that are showing up on scene, we're going to assign them some tasks. Maybe the first engine company, I'm going to say, hey, get your ERG book out. It's kind of a little guide, a little gospel thing for us that says, and I'm going to go with the train derailment in Ohio. They found out what product they had. It was vinyl chloride. It's 1086. It's placarded on the train, the rail car. Probably weren't going to be able to read it because it was all on fire, but they told us what it was, right? So I go to my little guide. I can pull up page 1086. It's going to tell me that when I open this up, it's going to have a guide in it. And most of us already know what these steps are going to be. But if you're still uncertain, if I could give this to you, I could make you aware of what that product is and how we're going to mitigate it. So 1086, it tells me it's vinyl chloride, it's stabilized, and it's a 116p, guide page. It's not green, which means I don't have to worry about it as much because it's not as reactive with water. So I'm going to jump over here to guide, but that P is something that those people probably instantly said, hey, here's a problem. And it helped make those decisions for that community to say it is going to be a polymerization product. That product can get hot. If it does, it's going to expand. It's going to cause explosion, possibility, a very bad explosion. Burning that product off was probably a great choice. Sure, it was probably lengthy discussions. People just like sitting in this room right here trying to come up with what are we going to do and how are we going to make the community feel safe. I don't know if transparency is the cleanest and best thing to do sometimes in that regard because you just kind of go off what is in front of you at that time. So they did have the time to sit back, but once we go to that guide page, it kind of starts giving us references as simple things like, is it on fire? If it is, what are we going to do? Well, it's an explosion hazard because that's the very first thing it says in the page. Goes right along with that P. So it tells us whether or not our equipment's good for it. Can we go down range? Can we not go down range? Fire protection for us in a scenario like that, limited protection, SCBAs, fire attack, water. That's basically what we're going to do. But we also got to try and contain that water. So again, working directly, like when something like that happens, would be able to say, how do we get into the community, whether that be with the emergency manager, he starts working on processes with the city, he starts working on processes with the state, starts working with the federal government. Like in Ohio, obviously it was big enough that it just ramped straight all the way through. And obviously you see, discussions with the president on that topic. So it's big. And then now it's going to be an everlasting situation for that community for years and years to come. So for us, when we get there, basically we're going to try to isolate that scenario down to what we have, what it is, and where we need to make that stop. We're going to go in every kind of a hazardous situation. It's going to be uphill, upwind, upstream. We try to stay out of the product and make sure that we can isolate that. Another thing in this book is it's going to give us our evacuation zones. So instantly I can go back here to page, I think it's 112 if I remember right, but it's going to tell me, basically how big of those isolation areas need to be. And in this scenario for that product, it was a 1 mile radius. Large spill, they need to be 1 mile. The mayor did a good thing. He was 1 mile, 2 mile. So he broadened that to, the community to help make sure that they got that alleviated for the community. But we're going to also set up hazmat zones. So hot, cold, warm zones. We're going to establish command posts. We're going to establish safe area of refuge. We're going to start deciding whether or not we need to evacuate or not, and all that's going to be in communication, I mean, directly with whoever, you know, and then for us, it's going to be Grizzle. You know, hey, this is what we've got, this is what we see. You know, what is your stance on that? Where do you feel like we need to go? And we're going to quickly try and decide those things. And the thing for us is we got to decide those instantaneously. You know, you pull up on scene and you just got to say, this is what we got to do. And then you got to stick with the plan and move through it. And if it is a big event like they had, we'll create situations of PD is going to be involved, EMS is going to be involved, all the city people might be involved. We may be in contact with streets to be able to figure out how we shut things down. We'll be in contact with them to get dozer equipment, you know, front end loaders. You know, is it going to be?
Resources start building
Yeah,
at
they
that
start
point.
building.
Is the point, if we go into an area or to a situation where we have to evacuate and put those zones in, then obviously we're going to involve the police department. They're going to set up an evacuation process, and they're going to go off the guidebook of the wind speed and direction and all that, and they'll start moving them out. Question then for the city and for the policy group level, where do they go? What do we expect them to do?
And how do we get them there?
The city of Norman is
You know,
very
if there's
facility
any-
poor for sheltering. Is we face that deal almost every winter,
Yeah.
and it's a battle of what we do. So do we put them in a vacant grocery store that's trying to get a tenant right now, or do we ask them to go to 12th Street Recreation Center, which may be full of school kids because they have school programs in there all the time? Same way as Whittier and Irving attached to the schools. There are those things that need to be discussed at a different time, policy level. The other resources that come into play and can come rather quickly is through some phone calls, we can request for the 63rd Weapons of Mass Destruction Team, which is housed here in Norman, which when I was in the military department, I was there at the state level when that team was formed. So we know the capability and everything they can bring to the table. If you remember a few years ago when we had the white powder incident at the bank, we called 63rd in an advisory capacity because of their skills and knowledge. They came in and was able to advise at the time Deputy Chief Bailey on what they found and what they considered. They also have testing capability, on-site testing capability, that if we get that authorized, they can bring to us to help determine if we have any unknown resources. So that happens, and it happens awful quick. And the key thing to remember is it's the railroad's problem. We may be the responders, but the railroad has to take care of that. On the little grain derailment, the railroad was there probably within an hour. Those guys are amazing on their response capability. They had a tent city set up and they worked 24/7 for 2 or 3 weeks, cutting those cars up and hauling that grain out, taking care of it, putting everything back to a pre-disaster condition. So as we say, we're going to do all of this stuff, here comes the railroad guys, and the railroad guys may say, we got it. We've got hazmat crews coming, we've got cleanup teams, we've got this. So that collaboration with the railroad happens almost immediately once that call to 911 happens. So it can start out small in response and build to a very big response very fast. And then, as Ronnie said, we have to evaluate the impact to the city. Is that going to meet any kind of thresholds? The latest, I want to say the latest federal threshold for a federal declaration, Cleveland County is nearly $1 million, over 900,000 now. So if we can't get a federal declaration, can we get a state declaration? We have to meet the same threshold. So it really, those levels happen simultaneously as the response is going on. In this case, Chief Travis, Emergency Management Director, and I work with the federal and state side to see what's out there, what's available, what we can bring in resources. The other aspect of it that rarely gets talked about is the volunteer organizations active in disaster. And there is a lot of outstanding organizations here locally that can be tasked or asked to come in and help out immediate feeding. You've got several groups, not to mention the big names, the Salvation Army and the Red Cross and United Ways. We've got several groups who have little small 501c3s. I've been working with a group, Hugs, and I can't remember the name, the rest of it. They just got their 501c3 designation, and they just completed the manufacture of a portable shower unit. And their goal in their ministry is the homeless, but it's still an asset. And if we needed to do a hasty recon, they can bring in a portable shower unit right here. you know, rather than having to wait for the Salvation Army or somebody Baptist or somebody to bring one of the big units in. So we've identified, real quick, we've identified the immediate response. We've identified how we look at it and build resources and assets. We've provided an example of what some of the stuff that comes through Norman. I will tell you again, Ronnie, please correct me if I'm wrong, in a general statement, the threat from train derailment to the city of Norman is basically ethanol-based. So it's water soluble, but it does go boom, and it burns. So we gotta mitigate against that if it should it happen. That's the on the bad end of the scale. Ronnie talked about the ERG. Those things are free to the public. If you want to become a chemical enthusiast, we can get you some ERGs, and we can. When I first started, I had my volunteers set out at North Base with some Cokes and hot dogs, and the trains went by, and we wrote down numbers, and we kind of self-taught how to use those books. The other thing that you might be interested in, just for informational purposes, is some of the applications you can get on your phone. One of the most common one is called Wiser. It's my understanding Wiser is going to go out of business here the next year or two, but it's a phone-based application, point and click. All you got to do is put in characteristics of what you're seeing, and that application can search it. It will tell you the hazards. It'll tell you everything Ronnie said. It'll tell you the hot zone, the clear zone, the evacuation zone, the what if type stuff, and so it's in the palm of your hand anymore. Ronnie was showing me several others. May I ask you to?
Yeah, we've got
point out a couple.
So some of the advantages to us in the fire department is every one of our fire trucks and our brush rigs are now starting to be equipped with those, but a lot of us put them on our phone too. But on the fire truck, there's an iPad, and those are all maintained within the fire department where we upload apps on there. And for us, those apps, some of them that we utilize are going to be the Wiser app that he just discussed. This ERG is on there as its own. The NIOSH, which is a kind of a conjunction with this to kind of bounce back and forth depending on the product that you utilize. There's an Ask Rail, which we've done lots of training with BNSF. It's come through, and they do this training with us every maybe year or 2 years or so. And several of us in the department, I've probably been through that class, I don't know, maybe at least 4 times, if not 5. But Ask Rail was one of the apps that when they came through, they said, hey, there's a good app for you. We actually have to put in for that app with your city email, and has to have a request from the fire department. So I have to put like Chief King's name in or somebody's name in for them to be able to just give that. It's not just a free app for somebody to go do what they want unless they get recognition on the backside. Hazmat, IQ, and Chem Safety, those are all, and then we have a mobile REM app, which is basically like if you have radiation or something along those lines. So we keep all those apps on our tablets, kind of at our fingertips. We also carry basically the NIOSH and the ERG as a hard copy. You know, if this breaks, you got to have backup. So a couple of things I would like to say too is that I think one of the things I didn't address is that a hazmat would be responding on that. We have a hazmat that's at Station 2 that would come to that call. And like something I would consider, and I didn't really think about it much until obviously coming to this meeting, is like, what are our waterways that cross over somewhere between Moore and going out of Norman? And realistically, you know, as I got to thinking about that, the first thing that hit my mind is, which isn't in our community, but it does impact, you know, our community for people that want to go to Moore, their water treatment plant sits against the railroad tracks. So, you know, if it hits that right there where the animal shelter is, and just on the north edge of where our split is, you know, that's a really bad thing. And if it hits Boyd Street to Lindsay to south of that and hits Bishop Creek or hits the duck pond, it's going to hit everything south, you know, for us. So, I mean, good thing is we don't have like really the water treatment plants and things that are right there, you know, immediately. But those are probably some bigger things. And maybe a huge plus for Norman is the train almost goes straight through Norman. You know, we don't have curves or bends, but if it has a failure, a mechanical failure, I mean, obviously we know it can happen, the grain bin deal. So, but anyways, those are a few things that I just kind of thought about as the day went on. And I thought, well, what kind of waterways do we really have? I mean, obviously I understand there's spillways and drains and, you know, where the water is going to go. But so anyways, just food for thought for us maybe.
Great, thank you, Ronnie. Sir, you got a question?
Councilmember Peacock, I think.
Yeah, do we get any kind of advance notice on like really bad stuff that comes through? Like say there was nuclear material that was on a train. Do we?
No, we'll never know if nuclear
Never,
material
okay.
comes through here. I speak from my military experience with that. If I was curious, I could probably find out. I had previous experience with some of that stuff. The really bad stuff, that's kind of funny, I gotta tell you that question. Answer that question that we got when I got hired, first training that Ronnie's talking about. We asked the instructor, how much really bad stuff comes through the city of Norman? And he said, well, and this is 2003, 2004. He said, well, last year we got the number of trains going through Norman of the really bad stuff down to 294. So that listing that you have gives an indication of what could be really bad stuff going through Norman. So, I mean, I don't know a current commodity flow of so-called really bad stuff.
Sure.
You know, just take it to heart that there is a hazardous material flowing through Norman, just like any other city in the state of Oklahoma, as well as pipelines. And the oil field that we have in our area is still as just as much a concern, if not more so in some cases than the trains are. Yes.
On this document, which line is the actual number of cars that come through with these materials?
Man,
Yeah.
While he's looking at that too, I don't know if anybody caught some of the stuff in Ohio and kind of asking about the quantity of chemicals that can be on a train. I did hear a statement
these are
of
the
50
car
train cars were on that
numbers,
train
and,
that wrecked. 20 of those were carrying hazardous chemicals.
of that.
So, you know, I do know that when they
Total number
load
of
train cars, they
cars
can't put
trained.
chemicals next to each other that are,
very-
an issue just
a
for
lot.
this purpose,
Sure.
you know, that they
Yeah.
can't overlap with each other.
Quite a bit.
About 10% of the train transportation that moves
this is
through the
a
United
flow.
States is 8 to 10 is hazardous materials. But it's probably the safest rail system is probably the safest way of transport. So, obviously, they're gonna have failures. Airplanes have failures, cars have failures, trucks, you know, pipelines, yeah, everything has a failure. But, you know, you just try to mitigate the best you can. And maybe speeds, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of stuff recently. You know, speed of the train, you know, making sure those things are done. But it did sound like there was a lot of positive things, but some of the checks that were being done on trains aren't as required as much as they used to be. 2-minute time used to be the check times, 30 to 40 seconds are check times on rail cars nowadays. So, you know, maybe if that gets bumped back up, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I don't know. But I mean, that's not our problem, but it is if we have more and more incidents. I mean, Grizzle showed me just a little plume thing on his phone a minute ago of all these trains, and he said these are all just recent.
Oh, I'll speak
So,
some, you said mention,
yeah.
what I meant to mention, I failed to do so, another big partner is National Weather Service. We have such an amazing group of people we work with at National Weather Service. And if something of that nature happens here, and it happens a lot, and they do it a lot with wildfires, National Weather Service creates plumes for wildfires, which you can see they put out to the public on their websites. All it takes is that fast for somebody to pick up the phone, call the operations center, say, help. And then they're flooding us with weather data as it applies to that disaster. So we have a very robust support group, a collaboration of partners here also.
Councilor Shirley?
I'm really appreciating all of this information and also, you know, to really understand like how prepared Norman is to, I guess, respond to something like this. So some of the questions that I had while you were talking were related to how do we get the message out to our residents? Like if we are doing an evacuation or we're closing streets down or any of those things, because I think it's like, you know, oh, we're putting it on Facebook, but like I think it's a much bigger call than just, you know, our
during
news
the
brief,
year,
but
during the year, with my volunteer response groups, we attend a lot of the events, like the Norman Night Out. Recently, we had our response trailer out there. We do several events. We do the Medieval Fair. I'm doing SoonerCon. We're doing events all year long. And even though we're providing some kind of service like a basic first aid station, we always have preparedness material and preparedness information, and we talk to the residents. When they find out that that I'm the guy with the handling the sirens, they love to talk to you. See, so you know, we get in those conversations face to face, and then throughout the year we put out preparedness messages. city manager's office through the PIOs have always put out stuff that we've given them on
Right.
preparedness. September is National Preparedness Month. And not only here, but you'll see a lot of information come out. So all of that leads up to the event. It never fails to amaze me that F5 tornado can come through, and yet they always find somebody that says, nobody told me. Same thing, so you got the event going on, and we have a lot of tools and assets. We have fantastic PIO working for the city who came from an emergency management background out of Lawton. And so she has a lot of connections in her right. We have the RAVE system, which is outstanding. We have our siren system has voice capable, that it's not as good as it can be because it's not intended for that,
Right.
but it does have that capability. And then along with that lines, we do have our departmental social media, and in our way down we even get in vehicles with loudspeakers and can drive through the neighborhoods and say, you know, this is what we want you to do, which in fact is what happened in 2012 during the wildfire out in the east. It's so big of an area that the police and fire actually use their loudspeaker systems to try to get warning out to people to they need to evacuate. So there's different levels, a lot of tools.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Just thinking about what a massive undertaking that might be. And yeah, how do we get that out? So the other question that I had was related to, you know, if there is a train derailment, it's really a railroad, I guess, issue to clean up. I mean, you know, all of that. But at what level is the city still, I guess, involved? Because it's our community, it's our residents,
Sure.
you know, it impacts the people that live here. So I feel a little bit hesitant to maybe think that like, oh, we're just handing over the reins completely to them. But I'm assuming that you have someone that is a liaison as the cleanup is ongoing, or
Yes, definitely.
you know, whatever.
It's cradle to grave. City's involved, cradle to grave, you bet.
Yeah.
All the way through the cleanup on the grain. I mean, we were over there simply because it was nominally and seeing everything, had a lot of spectators. But it's cradle to grave. Yeah, you bet. We have the liaison, as you can see from the material that I've got you. You know, we keep those partnerships working all the time and keep those lines of communications open. You bet.
So when they're making decisions, I guess the railroad around cleanup and all of that, like the city is at the table giving information or providing feedback, like this is going to negatively impact, you know, whatever, we need to get this message out to our residents. Like, I think those are things that I'm concerned about, is like that they don't have just like unilateral decision-making that.
Really depends the specifics, I'm thinking, because, you know.
We're talking in hypotheticals, so I know that's really challenging.
Well, and I
The
think,
railroad jurisdiction goes so far out from that easement, from that track, and if their spill contaminates these houses, they're still responsible for it. So those things just have to be worked as they're identified. So I'm sorry I can't just give you a hard nail answer, but it really depends on what happens. And then just like in Ohio, now that federal government's involved and now they're looking at some safety breaks that they didn't have, they should have had, and now they're looking at the climate effect on Ohio. Now it's acid rains coming down, and so, you know, you could be talking years for that cleanup to occur.
Yeah, just thinking also like, what is our recourse as a city if, you know, it is the railroad's fault and they're having all of these impacts, like they are in East Palestine, like, I guess what is our recourse to like figure those
Well,
things out?
it's the same thing. We through various channels, whether it's city staff or volunteers, we do surveys, we try to get what's going on with the community and the residents in the area, and we paint a picture. We do that assessment of that picture, and then state and level involved. If it gets to a point, obviously, where it's not going the way the city thinks it ought to go, then that's why these guys across the street are now are they still here? Guys across the hall here, they get paid a lot of money. You know,
the
they
attorneys.
get that.
They're
still across the hall.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of an evolving process.
Yeah, okay. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, unless it's something just absolutely blatant, you know, and then
Sure.
and then it's boom, you establish that kind of stuff. But usually, it's an evolving process about, you know, who, what, where, when, who's going to pay, so forth,
Yeah.
so on.
Councilmember Green?
So I'm hearing on the policy end of things too, where to put people was the thing that stood out to me through this presentation. I was kind of curious what other cities do, but then you mentioned there was that whole incident in Ward 5. Where were people supposed to go when they're being told to evacuate? Did we have something in place at that time? Do we have anything in place at all right now?
Can you help me out? Which incident in Ward 5?
You were
Talking
saying
about
there's
the
a
white powder
yeah,
situation at 36 and Robinson.
yeah, where you were on the loudspeakers telling people.
Wildfires.
2012.
Oh, the wildfire,
Yeah.
okay. Talking about the wildfire incident in 2012?
Yeah, did we have a plan for where those people should go?
A lot of those people, OU graciously stepped up and went to OU. They, and during the tornado, OU stopped up as a partner and said, send them over here and we'll take care of them for a while. And in the, I'm sorry, I can't remember which tornado, where they actually were out of school and they had the dorms and they put all those people in the dorms as a temporary shelter. And unfortunately, FEMA never did reimburse them for that. They declared that as a permanent replacement housing instead of a shelter. So what we have to do is we have to find what facilities are in the area and then work with whoever has that facility, whether it's a church or whether it's the community centers. And if it's a community center and it's full of kids, then that's somebody else's level. We'll work with the NPS and say, hey, we need this building. And you work those out. And you work those out really fast, I promise you.
So we don't have something standing, like a working relationship with anybody specifically right now.
Well, no, I mean, we do. If we have a situation and the University of Oklahoma can help, they will. If we have a situation and we
So like even the
can work
National
with the
Guard
NPS.
offered to come serve.
Oh, yeah, you wouldn't use National Guard office.
I meant like they
the
have, like-
facility.
Oh,
You
don't have
wouldn't,
one.
that wouldn't happen.
So you kind of just, it depends on where the disaster is and what's available.
Yes, and if it's further east, like 2012, there were several churches that opened up. The one on 156 and McGuire actually opened up and was our multi-agency coordination center. FEMA went in there and they rewired that entire church with massive telephone lines, brought in 30 or 40 VOAD agencies, provided a lot of assistance, fed people, and then so we had a center of operations, and everybody fed off of that.
So what I'm hearing is at the policy level, we'll just deal with it when it happens and see what's available. And what
We need to look at, maybe we need to look at what's available in terms of city facilities. And if we can't identify city facilities, then we may need to reach out to some of the churches and maybe have some discussion, or anyone that has a building that would facilitate a shelter. You have to remember, if not aware, most of the time in the past, the answer to sheltering was called the Red Cross. And the Red Cross no longer is a lead agency on sheltering. Now you call the Red Cross and they say, tell me where to be and we're here to support you. You have the one that has to find the facility, you are the one that has to open the doors, make sure it's ADA compliant, has all the necessary requirements that the Red Cross requires for them to come in and take over. And that happened, church on 36th Street, Big Baptist Church up there. They in fact were one of the first Red Cross supported shelters that we utilized during one of the tornadoes, 2013, I think. And it worked quite well.
Last question to that point. Could our public safety study, which might be happening now, I don't know, could it identify this inventory of possible shelters?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of public safety study.
We've funded a assessment of our public safety apparatus, our entire response in Norman, to tell us personnel,
apparatus or-
facilities. Well, I mean, just all the fire stations, future fire stations, the police department, future police department,
EOC.
vehicles, personnel, EOC, basically every public safety entity that we have in Norman, an assessment of all of it, and ideally a plan that tells us where we need to go.
Maybe I can get a foot in the door there and we tag along with public and private cooperation on this particular
We
subject.
funded it in last year's budget, but it hasn't
I know the city manager's office is working
taken
on
on.
it.
It hasn't. I think it's still in the process.
So
Yeah.
we could get an inventory of things.
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a critical facility listing that was identified for the EOP, so sure, it's very much similar.
Yeah.
As far as structures.
Yeah.
Doesn't contain apparatus, just facilities. So,
Okay. Well, and my rough calculation is that we have about 10,950 trains a year come through Norman, just based off of 30 trains a day, 365 days a year. So,
yeah, it's a lot.
and only 300 are potentially hazardous, but that's compared to how many are coming through. So I guess that's, somewhat of a comforting thing, I suppose, that there's a lot coming through and a small percentage relatively, but it only takes one
Just that
to
one,
be a
that's
problem.
right.
So, any other questions from committee about this?
Can I make a comment about trains?
Sure.
Questions about who's responsible for what in terms of like where the roads come together with the one over on Eufaula and James Garner has been highlighted this week. It's not great. There's like some potholes and stuff as the concrete gets to the apron. So if we
That's
can-
that's Public Works.
yeah. Okay.
That guy right there.
Yeah. Hey, I saw you in the room, so.
How about Constitution?
Hey, they've got
Constitution is probably,
they've got the panels.
it'll kill you.
They've
Yeah.
got the panels lined up on the side right
okay.
now. So I think Sean was saying.
Street crossing has materials delivered.
Yeah.
And,
Awesome.
I saw 'em.
Any day thing.
That'd be
So,
fantastic. I drove
again-
over that today and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear
The
that? I'm
railroad
so sorry,
was
guys.
here before we were.
Yes.
Right.
Let's just say that, right? And their right of way is their right of way, just like ours is ours.
So is that part of the, like as far as that goes, like the railroad track is right here, right on the side of that. Is that part of, is that ours?
Yeah.
So everything is ground basically that goes through the crossings is basically the city?
Railroads.
Yeah, right up to them. And so, like, we're putting in pedestrian crossings at Constitution and at Brooks, which are really the last two in the urban area that don't have them. And so we construct it up to
Up to there.
our approach up to there, and then we have to wait sometimes quite a while sometimes for them to come in and finish the part on their property.
Well, there's the little thing about needing to give them the check for them to do it too.
Right, too. We have to pay them to do that. So.
Right, we
But
joke
the one
about
on-
that, but it's true that we are really guests in their right of way.
Right.
They were here first, and that's the way we always approach it. We have a good working relationship, just like emergency management does, but they move at their own pace. They're very expensive. The rates that we pay for 80 work in the right of way for the railroad is 3-4 times what we would pay anywhere else. They're a unionized workforce, and they can set their own rates. I refer to them as a sovereign nation, if you think of it that way. There really is no one regulating the railroad. We have the Corporation Commission who does certain regulations, but they are really above that in terms of their existence in space. And so we just work really hard at having a good working relationship. That's the best outcomes that we can derive.
And an example of a great collaboration between the railroad and the city of Norman is the no horns.
Yes.
No horns. So we have that, we have that relationship with the railroad to come in and visit with us. And they put on training all the time, just like pipelines. And if you go to their training, they normally feed you dinner free, so. it's good
Right,
stuff.
and we did get an update a few months ago about the quiet zone and the crossing safety and stuff like that. And I always remind folks, because some folks think the city forced the railroad to let us do that, and it's the other way around. BNSF had to give us permission to do that, and we had to go through their whole lengthy process to do it. So
Yes, and Sean's exactly right. You have to remember the railroad was put in the onset of this country.
right,
And by such, they were given sovereign nation status way back then. And it's, their officers, their law enforcement officers are federal officers.
right.
It's federal property, 110%. They control what goes on where their tracks go, that's for sure.
In answer to your question on Constitution Street, any day now. At this point, our last update was a couple of weeks ago, and they said they had it on the schedule within the next couple of weeks. We don't get a lot of notice. We do our best to keep in touch with them. They're probably tired of me and others who call regularly just to get updates, but anytime we do get advance notice from them, we reach out and we work with Tiffany to put out a press release letting people know. Sometimes our notice comes 12 hours after the railroad shuts down our road and traffic's backed up for a mile.
Yeah.
But yes, and then Eufaula Street is another location that they've identified in their maintenance list, but they have not provided any timeline on.
Yeah, the pictures that I saw just looked like it was like the asphalt was kind of chipping away from like their apron,
Their
concrete
thing is
aprons.
loose and it's.
Who is that? Them? Is that us?
We can work with them, and,
Okay.
and we will in.
There's been a conversation
best
in
that we can.
Facebook land about whose responsibility it is, and so it just would be nice to know.
It's their responsibility.
Yeah, technically it's there. Think about 65 to 100 feet either, or total, so 30 to 50 either side of the center of the rail is railroad property. So that little wedge of asphalt or concrete is theirs, but we help them a lot of times build that to keep the repairs going quickly.
Okay.
And we have to coordinate that.
Yes.
Understand that when you work in the railroad right of way, you have to have a certification. From my knowledge, there are a handful of us down in the streets who have had that certification in the past. I know that mine was for Union Pacific in Colorado, so mine has expired, I believe.
Yeah.
But we have to have permission and they have to have a staff member present when we do any work, technically within the right of way, so
Well.
a lot of coordination.
Okay, well, flagging it for coordination, I guess. Thanks. Appreciate you.
Okay.
I did want to say one thing about you asking about alerting people. I know I've been part of the city website, building all that out for our department and managing it with other agencies and stuff within the city, but we've got those alerts that can be put on the top. I know a lot of people probably don't pay attention to that, but the people that do get on those sites, at least it's there. I see it on every page. You can make those alerts page specific, or you can make them be on every page. So you could make that like the person that gets on that wants to look at the burn page.
Yeah.
It's going to have a ribbon up there that says train derailment at, if it's been the grain one, flood in Rock Creek. Well, guess what? I'm not going to go that way, if I see that. So there is a little bit of maybe being able to alert people that way.
Yeah, and
too.
we also try, every time I'm talking to residents, I'm always talking about like getting onto the Norman News, like getting those alerts, the email things that, Tiffany pushes out all of our press releases. Like, I think that's a really great way just to make sure that I don't read them all the time. We get them on our phones and stuff, but it does go to our email and people could look at that.
But
And so
also,
that could be another.
at least for city employees, you have the employee self-service portal, which we did the test last year on being able to push people out that push like an Amber Alert type deal through to your phone. So if you were a city of Norman employee, probably council people, it would probably push directly to your phone and just
I can't remember.
hit your
I
phone.
don't remember that, but
Yeah.
Have we done one?
we have lots of things.
They only did it once.
Y'all have lots of things that we don't have access to, so just
Well, it's
to be fair.
it's basically if you're employed in the city, then you probably have
Phone's
access
on the
to
same
it.
plan, so we
Yeah,
probably would
it's-
have.
I just mean we don't have access to that portal.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Okay.
that is something. But that's
Yeah.
another thing too. At least it would be to people within
Yeah,
Norman
that's fair.
as far as the workforce.
Okay, well, I definitely appreciate all the information. I think it's helpful and hopefully comforting to residents if they watch that we are prepared in Norman. We do have plans in place. That our fire department is ready if something like this should happen. We have emergency management that is very familiar with the issues and knows what to do. Are there any other questions from anyone? Okay. I don't have any other questions either, so thank you very much, David. Thank you
For recover that information, I sure appreciate you allowing us to come in and spend so much time with you.
Well, anytime if you think there's something we need to discuss in here, so. Okay, we got one more item. The discussion regarding fencing types along Interstate 35 through Norman. This is a relative, maybe minor issue, but when I spoke to the Boy Scouts back in November, I think it might have been December, but I went to their Scout Cub meeting, and when I asked for questions, one of them asked me about the fencing that we have along Lindsay and 36th Extension, the white picket fence looking that goes through there. And at the time, it had some damage, and they were like, "Who maintains that? Is the city going to do anything?" And so,
Sorry.
You're good.
and I said, "Yes, it will likely get fixed," and it did get fixed probably a week later. But that got me thinking, and I had been kind of thinking about it before, but along I-35 throughout Norman, there's kind of a hodgepodge of fencing in specifically the University North Park area. The I-35 frontage fence is still the old like cattle guard barbed wire fence that would have been there when it was still farmland. And then on parts of it, it's a chain link fence, and it's kind of just a mismatch here and there, and some parts don't have it at all. And we've probably all seen how the setup they've done in Moore. I think between 4th Street and 34th, they have a pretty nice decorative fence on both sides of I-35 that aesthetically is really nice, looks clean. And so was thinking about what we might have, what plans we might have for I-35 in Norman when it comes to that that particular thing. So if you have any presentation for us here.
Yeah, I put together a few slides. So the question was posed, what would the process be if Norman approached ODOT about installation of a fence? And so I wanted to start with just kind of highlighting what you just said there, which is there's various barrier and fence materials throughout the corridor. All of these are intended by the state as access control onto the interstates. So when you get out into rural highway settings, you will see kind of those beaten paths where people have created their own on-ramp, if you will. The goal is to avoid that and different fence types throughout the corridor. Some of these probably there for a long, long time. On the I-35 corridor right now, the city does not have any right-of-way maintenance responsibilities. So we don't mow, we're not responsible for the fence, and any requests to install a decorative fence or change the fencing type would have to be approved by ODOT. And additionally, just pose the question to our partners at District 3 and ask them whose responsibility for changing that fence type, who would it be financially and in perpetuity, the maintenance of it. And that sole responsibility would end up falling on the city after the change, if approved. Process-wise, fairly simple on paper, right? Ask for their approval. If we get their approval, we move forward. Implementation might be a little bit more of a challenge, though. They could require plans. That topic really never got touched, but building a map of I-35 from the north city limits to the south city limits is kind of challenging, so bear with me here. We've got it on two different slides, but the highlighted green zone is where we have existing fence along the I-35 right-of-way. Again, the various types of fence. And the blue is highlighted as the existing barricade. So that's going to be the hardened concrete barricade or sound wall that we have in sections throughout. The south end has more of the barricade, the hard barrier. And so on to the Lindsay extension, the white vinyl fence, my favorite fence in the whole city, I gotta tell you. So
Nice.
I chose these photos for a reason. So first of all, the bottom left here, that is actually a recent photo of the fence in South Moore as you're approaching the corridor that you mentioned, council member. And I spoke with their public works director a couple of days ago just to ask him, hey, how's that fence treating you? And they spent $10,000 last month maintaining just their one little tiny section of fence that they have there along the interstate. So Lindsay Extension, of course, we do have the same fencing. In the last, I would say 8 months in reality, both incidents took place, one over the summer and then one into the fall here. We've spent over $20,000 this year maintaining that fence from all the damage caused. 2 vehicular incidents, they plow right through that stuff. And then we also have a lot of pedestrian and animal impacts that take place. There's a lot of deer that cross there. The vinyl fencing is fairly sensitive to UV rays, so you get 5 years and it becomes very brittle. Deer jump over, they clip the top and start to break chunks off. And we've had people build their own walkway in a section of the Lindsay extension, and when we closed it off, they within a few weeks it was back in place. And so top rail gets taken off very regularly as well. But just to kind of put into perspective what it would look like if we did today just say, hey, we're gonna put decorative fence up and we choose the white vinyl fence as our product. There's roughly 14 miles of existing right-of-way fence along the I-35 corridor. Average cost, utilizing what we've spent on maintenance, and then also reaching out to some of our fencing contractors just to get an idea of price per linear foot. We came up with a dollar value around $24. With that, roughly $1.7 million just to remove and replace fence that exists today. And that accounts for all the fence. We kind of went through and just accounted for everything being one uniform. But in addition to installing a fence like that, it is very high maintenance. I live very close to the Lindsay Extension fence as well, so I see it every day. And every day, there have been multiple occasions where I leave for work in the morning and I will pull off to the side of the road and pop a top rail back in, just because it drives me nuts. But it's very high maintenance. So it would require regular budget dollars annually to maintain a corridor like that. In addition to that, there may be some incidental maintenance that comes with it. You never know if they're going to require us to mow the right-of-way abutting these fences, because this is...
They're not mowing them right now, just as you showed in your picture.
ODOT has, their mowing has gone down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Very limited cycle due to the monarch migration kind of patterns and what they're trying to do in that corridor.
That's good then.
And so...
it does just catch your attention, especially in the University North Park area, because we've spent so much money trying to build up that area, enhance it, make it an attraction, and then it's got, first thing people see when they come through on I-35 is the cattle guard fence and the grown-up grass all around it on each side. So, Councilmember Grant?
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or not, but if this is kind of like high maintenance, are there alternatives we could look at?
So,
absolutely.
Material alternatives.
I think there are many material alternatives out there, and I can tell you I'm probably the most against the white vinyl fence as it gets, just to be honest. But technically you can put any fence, any type of fence. The cost does go up though. And generally speaking, the white vinyl fence, one reason that you see it utilized a lot is it's very cheap to install. And most of the time, the people installing it initially are not the people responsible for maintaining it in the future.
But it has a short lifespan and
Very
costly to maintain. So
Very.
maybe something that's more expensive to put in would last longer and require less of us to maintain.
I mean, this is a huge item and resources. I struggle right now to maintain the Highway 9 corridor, mowing wise. Every year, it gets harder and harder.
Something we had to take over, I don't know, 10 years ago now, but used to be a ODOT thing, and then they said, well, the city, you need to mow it now. And that was a
gift, wasn't it?
yeah. At the time, I recall it being around $200,000 a year addition for us to mow the right-of-way or something like that back in
120.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts on this would be perhaps we look at a specific area, maybe from Robinson to Rock Creek or Robinson to Tecumseh, since that's kind of the bulk of it, and where there is development. There's not as much along the interstate north of Tecumseh. So maybe look at some sort of what it would take to do a decorative fence along I-35 in just that section, not the vinyl, but one that would be more durable and long-lasting. Look at replacing the Lindsay Extension one with a more durable and long-standing one as well. I'd be open to that, given that $20,000 a year. I feel like if that's what it's taken to maintain that, we could maybe, it might be worth it over time to go ahead and replace it with something other different material. So I maybe want to see some sort of a rough plan for those two things, and then we can see what the cost is if we want to do anything, and maybe leave it the way it is or not. Councilmember Grant?
Also, is there ecological benefits to one versus another? Like you said, you looked at materials and whatnot. I'm kind of curious, like, what's a sustainable option?
Oh, I don't know that I'm the right guy to ask.
Okay, but,
I'm sorry.
So what materials did you identify for fencing?
So
that would
we
be different?
didn't. This really, again, the reference was to the Lindsay Extension fence.
Okay.
And so we really just kind of focused on that fence being the kind of the highlight product.
And because it's the same one that Moore has.
And it's consistent with that corridor theme that Moore has already established.
And they did that whole process, though? They had to get ODOT to allow them to do that years ago, or?
And if you look at the limits of that, it really falls into the development in that area.
It's just,
I mean, it really meets the development of that area, and so it was probably established as kind of a part of that master theme. It probably started in one little section and grew. I would also add that as ODOT, does work on I-35, plans an improvement project. I'm not aware of anything right now necessarily within our city limits, but as those projects come through, that is also a good time for the city to maybe reach out to get in on the ground floor of one of those projects and have something like this where the aesthetics incorporated into the project.
And then the part of the Lindsay corridor fencing that gets broken by people, it sounds like, pretty regularly for that walking path. Is that a place to put, like, are they going for a nature walk into the woods? Like, where is this trail going?
The trail, the break in the fence is a trail that goes straight into the woods. That's private property. We maintain to the fence and just on the back side of the fence, and we don't go beyond that. So
Possible that former residents of that wooded area were probably using that as a.
yeah, it's a very large, heavily wooded area. So any number of things. We see everybody walking, hiking, biking in that area. So
Right.
Okay, interesting.
Well, like I said, I'd be interested in maybe a proposal to replace that fence with something more long-lasting and durable. And then what it might take to do Robinson to Rock Creek, or maybe Robinson to Tecumseh, I don't know. But and it doesn't have to be white, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be the same as what Moore has done. But I think it would be worth looking into, especially because we've invested so much in that particular span of I-35 on our side. So, I'd really appreciate the information. That's very helpful to have some more details about just the one fence.
Yeah,
how much it can cost
absolutely.
to do something. So, when we have that, council can take a look and decide if we want to go forward or it's not really worth the cost. Leave it the way it is. So. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and staff and everybody for your work. This meeting's adjourned.